we let this guy just be the head coach. We've surrounded him with a great culture of good general managers. Bob Myers is still working for the organization, helping pick the right guy. Let's not forget that. Like all these things in place that we loved how they were happening, those all happened and chose Dan Quinn. Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, we got our guy.
Wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. Cut ties for the lives that you've been living in. If you something, see me again, I would understand. Oh man, it's here. I tried to prepare y'all for it. I tried to warn y'all. And here we
Dan
are.
Quinn.
Danny Quinn. Through the whole process, it was always like, yeah, the Commanders are going to get Ben Johnson, but don't be surprised if it's Dan Quinn. And everybody kind of said that part kind of quiet. And then old Benny got cold feet and wanted to stay in Detroit. And here we are. Dan Quinn, we weren't supposed to be surprised. We're very surprised. We're here with you guys on an emergency podcast, breaking it down. Pop, reactions, thoughts, feelings. Where are you
I
at?
took the ladder down, not climbing up on the roof. I'm okay.
There it is. There it is. Good. Good. I was
I
worried
even
about
adopted the look, trying to grow in the goatee.
it. Yeah, we got
Not
the
quite
backwards
there
hats
yet.
on in celebration. I wasn't going to shave my beard for this. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm sorry, Dan. I don't look too good without the beard.
Anyway, I mean, I think that all along, he was probably high on their list. I'm not sure that he was at the top of the list. I really think they were planning to go out there and land Ben Johnson. And that was the plan. That was plan A.
Yeah.
But I think he's, clearly a guy they liked all along. In fact, many of us kind of were raising our eyebrows when they brought him in for a second interview. And, you're hearing reports even at that time how much they liked him. So, I think at the end of the day, you got to go with the best option that you can come up with. And, I think that there are a lot of things to like about Dan Quinn. And, the thing is, people will always try to come up with examples of, second acts that don't work out, but there are some that do. And we'll see. I mean, now it comes down to building out a staff. There's some wild rumors running around about that. And,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we got to ride with them. I think we got to
Yep.
ride with them.
Yeah.
So,
It's gonna be interesting. You gotta, like I said, you gotta ride with him. I think he's a great leader. I think you listen to the way his players talk about him. They love him. They go out of their way to talk about how much they love him. You listen about how some of the coaches on his staff have talked about him. There's that quote from his defensive backs coach. It's escaping me at the moment, in Dallas, that he basically says, like, look, I'll follow that guy to the ends of the earth. Wherever he
right.
goes, if he calls me, I'm there. I don't care if it's the same job. I'm taking it. It looks like we are probably going to bring in the Cowboys pass game coordinator on the defensive side of the ball. It's Joe Witt Jr. as the new defensive coordinator, most likely. That would be Dan Quinn's understudy. And he was the guy he was the favorite to get the DC job in Dallas should Dan Quinn step down. So it looks like they're going to have to kind of start from scratch in Dallas on the defensive side of the ball, which is great for us.
They're interviewing Ron.
Yeah.
Reports
Go
are.
ahead. Go ahead. I like that.
How would we feel about going up against Ron Rivera defense in Dallas twice a year?
I mean, what, Dallas hung 45 on the Ron Rivera defense twice? I think we'd be okay. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the challenge. Feel just about as good as going up against it in Philly if that were to be where he lands. But yeah, no, I slowly talked myself into it over the course of the day, and I'm now feeling a little bit excited. And I'm kind of looking at some of the pieces on the roster and the way this team's built, and I'm saying, okay, maybe Dan Quinn, maybe a guy like Dan Quinn is a better fit. Now, I got a little bit of breaking news I just saw on the Twitter. Mike
Wow.
Garafolo is reporting that Dan Quinn was actually the favorite after the second Ben Johnson interview didn't go so hot. And it was a you can't fire me, I quit kind of situation there. So I'd already kind of mentioned that that might have been something that was going on and that I smelled something fishy. Garofolo was saying on Seattle radio earlier that that's how he thinks that played out. That's what he heard. Um, but so just to say that, like, I don't think this is necessarily a like, you know, we're scrambling and
I'm
we
not
had to
so
hire
I'm
somebody.
I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm not sure which John Kahn was reported. I'm not sure that the Ben Johnson thing was ever as big of a slam dunk as we thought it was.
Yes.
But the fact that they were getting on a plane to go out to Detroit tells me that they hadn't given up on that idea yet.
They hadn't given up on it yet. Maybe it was they were more willing to give him a second chance kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. They felt like they had to do their due diligence on him. What I do know, and something that we didn't talk about last time, was John Keim was told this hire, regardless of if it was Johnson, Weaver, Glenn, whoever, was not going to be made until towards the end of this week. This is the timeline for the hire. That was told to him before Johnson pulled out. So that is information that's been on the
I mean,
table.
you
So
hear different reporting, and I guess we'll never really know. I don't think Dan Quinn was their first choice.
maybe not,
I
but
don't think he was. Now,
it was at least
I'm not saying that they didn't really like him and he wasn't a valid option for them, but I think he was the best of what they could swing. Once
yeah.
the decisions were made that were made by the other options that they had.
But the whole like they let the process go on for too long and they missed out on people. What I think that is personally, I think they felt good enough about Dan Quinn that they were willing to take the risk on seeing the Johnson thing all the way through and miss out on some of the other candidates because they felt so confidently about Quinn.
I
That's where
think the
I'm at.
bottom line
Piece
is
putting
like
the pieces together.
you ran through the candidates. I think if you could zoom back and think of it a different way, right? Ben Johnson decided not to leave Detroit, whatever the reasons are. The guy
Yeah.
that was, the apple of everyone's eye, the twinkle in everyone's eye, whatever the right metaphor is. He just decided he's not gonna go. Um, so I think if you look at the hires that took place, falling in each place, you could say, okay, well, Harbaugh. Well, Harbaugh, I think, was always going to San Diego. I just don't
Yeah.
think there was an option where that was ever going to be really a thing, and maybe they knew that. So, who do you have left that you would really, Raheem Morris? Okay, Raheem Morris, Dan Quinn. Honestly, very similar profiles. In
Same
fact,
guy.
I think Raheem's, head
Less
coaching record
accomplished.
was probably even less successful than Dan's.
Hasn't been to
Um,
a Super Bowl.
right. So, who do you look at? Okay, I know people have decided that Mike McDonald is the best out there, but is he really? He's a 36-year-old, I think, limited experience. Yeah, he hit big this year, but like you and I were talking about, I think offline, that Ravens defense turned out to have some pretty superstar players. Now, is it the player or is it the coach? You don't
We'll
know.
find out.
You got to give the coach credit for the performance. But, I think that if you look at the list of hires, there are a lot of guys you look at and go, well, that they're definitely were a better option than Dan Quinn. Like I said, maybe Harbaugh, who was never coming here. And the other guys, you don't know. So, I think that
Yep.
at the end of the day, like I said, I was hoping more for an offensive minded coach. I think there are a lot of advantages in getting an offensive minded coach, especially if you're going with the quarterback. But let's see. I mean, again, some interesting rumors around offensive coordinator. But, thinking of Dan Quinn as a leader, you do hear a lot of very positive, endorsements coming about him from players. I do like the fact that, this was an interesting nugget. I don't know if you heard this or not, but Logan Paulson actually played for Dan Quinn.
Hmm.
And Dan Quinn called Logan Paulson after the Atlanta thing didn't work out. And he said, "Hey, I'd like your feedback on what do you think could have gone better? What could I have done differently?" So he's gone around and, he's even talked about in interviews about how not properly replacing Kyle Shanahan was a real problem. And, the other thing to remember is that when Kyle went to Atlanta, Kyle was not the Kyle we know now. He had, things went wrong in Washington. Things didn't go that great in Cleveland for him. So, he picked Kyle Shanahan to be his offensive coordinator in a situation where he wasn't necessarily the hottest commodity out there. He was a guy that,
Sure.
had to very much prove himself. So now granted he did, and he turns out to be one of the best coaches in the NFL, as we've stated many times on the pod. So yeah, I mean, at this point, he's the guy. I'm going to support him. I'm not going to sit here and say anything about what type of coach he's going to be. I mean, I get. I'll make the Ron Rivera comparisons, right? They're undeniable in a sense, right? In a sense that okay, he's a defensive-minded coach who had got to a Super Bowl, but kind of flamed out at his last job, right? Didn't end well. But I think there's differences, and you and I talked about the importance of getting an X's and O's guy, getting a guy that's been in the game and that's been coaching actually, one side of the bar or the other. This is by all accounts an innovative X and O's guy. Maybe it's on the wrong side of the ball in some people's minds, defense versus offense. But he's a hands-on guy, hands-on with the players. And like I said, he's known for his innovation, putting guys in a bunch of different spots. Was one of the first to come up with the Buffalo nickel position in Seattle. So you could see he goes in the lab and he works it. And I think that's a really big difference between hiring a guy that was just fired as a head coach and had been in that management position type role already and continued in that. Plus, it's not a coach centric environment. Adam
That's a
Peters
big
is
thing.
running this show, and he's obviously okay with that. So, making that direct comparison to Ron is wrong. It's like somebody said, it's kind of like shopping in the same section of the store, but you're getting the Haagen-Dazs ice cream versus the Breyers or something like that. It's
And that's a
different.
big gap.
It's
That's a
different,
big gap
right?
between those two.
I'm
It's a
not
big
necessarily
gap
saying
between
he's
Haagen-Dazs and
Haagen-Dazs
Breyers.
worthy, but I'm just saying, it's different versions of things, and I don't think that direct comparison is fair. How it's going to work out, we don't know. We don't know. But I also think, sorry for going too long here, but what also hasn't changed is Adam Peters is our GM, and we got all that cap space, and we got the second pick in the draft, and we got what is it, the three picks in the top, you know, whatever the number is, but in the first two rounds. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of capital to work with, not only draft capital, but cap space. And I think that Adam Peters is going to go to work and really upgrade this roster. I think you're going to see big upgrades on defense. I think you're going to see big upgrades on offense, not only through the draft, but also in free agency. So I think that talent level is going to rise. And, if we get an upgrade in coaching and that talent level really rises, maybe it ends up resulting in some good things.
I hope. Yeah, we'll see. I think with Quinn, you know, he's just had success wherever he's been. Is just the bottom line. That Dallas defense has been, top 3 in points allowed, led the league in takeaways. I mean, look at what they did this year, right? You had Trayvon Diggs get hurt, and Deron Bland steps up, 5th round DB, steps up and leads the league in takeaways and had like 6 games, 7 games in a row with the pick
Yeah,
six,
it's a great
something like
point.
that. That is game breaking stuff. That is game
Yeah,
breaking stuff, right? You look at what he did in Seattle. He completely revolutionized the way the league played defense at the time with the single high safety defense that he was running out there.
Went to Super
He is
Bowls
always
back to
went to
back to
Super
back.
went to back-to-back Super Bowls. He is always on the cutting edge. Almost won back-to-back Super Bowls too. We all know how close that New England Seattle Super Bowl was with the Malcolm Butler interception at the goal line. They had him there, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, again in Atlanta, built a winner there, took them right to the top. Obviously, we all know how that 28-3 comeback went. Somebody had to lose that game. They were on the wrong side of that, unfortunately. And yeah, his defense couldn't make a stop. Kyle's offense also couldn't score three
they
points.
sputtered. They sputtered
It's how
too.
it
Yep.
goes. It's how it goes. It happens. But that's not to take away from how good some of those Falcons teams were. And I think, let's be honest. We're talking ourselves into this a little bit.
Yeah, we are.
This is not any of our first choices. We were here pounding the table for Ben Johnson, but I think to say that, and let's be fair here to the boy. I said Dan Quinn would be a top hire in most other head coaching cycles. It's just because there's this youth movement, there's this young, exciting thing going on that everybody wants to get behind. It's just because you have the Johnsons and the McDonald's coming out that you want to get behind those guys. I said I would be in favor of this hire a long time ago. I want to stand behind that. I think you start to think about it, a young, adding a young, inexperienced head coach to this situation could be a recipe for disaster as well. It is
For
just
sure.
as it is just as likely. I think that's a situation where you either have an absolute home run or you have such a nuclear fall apart, Josh McDaniels, Arthur Smith, that type of level of just complete disaster, right? In this
Yeah,
situation. And you don't like
it's a great point.
somebody needs to be the adult in the room. You got a new general manager, you're going to have a rookie quarterback, you got $80 million in cap space, you got a new ownership group. Somebody needs to be the guy who's been there before. Somebody, right? And
Agree.
maybe it was you get Ben Johnson and then you get a really experienced defensive coordinator. Fine. But somebody here needs to be the adult in the room. And I don't hate it being Dan Quinn. I think there are a lot worse adults to have in the room than Dan Quinn. I mean, look, the guy that looked at Micah Parsons and said, "You're a great middle linebacker, but what if we put you on the edge?" That guy knows something about football.
Yeah,
Okay. Might know a few more things about football than the guy who looked at Jamin Davis and said, "You're an okay outside linebacker, but let's make you the Mike. You're our Luke Kuechly." Might know a few more things. I don't know. And when you look at our defense, you have a lot of raw talent and athletic potential playing completely out of position. And you have a defense that was top three across the board a year ago. You have a lot of the same guys coming back now and we're just horribly miscoached and in the wrong scheme last year. So you wonder how quickly things can turn around on that defensive side of the ball with Dan Quinn. You also wonder with the staffs he's been able to put together before and with the way NFL insiders and people in the league talk about him and how highly revered he is, he's got access to good talent to put together this coaching staff. I believe that. So those two
that's a good
things,
point as
and
well.
how many times have we sat here and said Ron Rivera, the coach, never got a fair shot because Ron Rivera, the GM, was so bad? How do you know that Rivera would have been a failure if he had Adam Peters? You don't. So if we've got this new GM,
There's a pretty good chance he might have still been.
that's there's a decent chance. There's a decent chance, but you don't know. He hurt himself
That's
more
fair.
as a general manager than anything else. Ron, the GM, was the problem there. We've been over that a million
That
times.
that that
So,
I mean, the biggest problem with Ron, and I hope Dan gets a little bit of coaching up, is Ron failed to establish an identity on this team, and he failed to
100%.
make winning the priority. He started excuse making from the jump. And all I want to hear out of Dan Quinn's mouth, and I hope he gets the proper guidance to understand this fan base, is that it's all about winning.
Yep.
Don't give me it might take 3 years in your first presser. Please, for the love of God, they'll tell. It might take 3 years. He's starting from the bottom, but I don't want that attitude and that tone set from the jump.
Yep.
It's all about winning. I'm going to be judged on winning from day one, and that's what we're going to be about. That's what I want to
And
hear
he,
from.
and you know what he's not going to have to deal with? A sale, a rebrand, all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Dan Snyder.
Dan Snyder allegations, all those things off the table. You know, Landfill had a great quote on B. Mitchell
Maybe
Daily
a
this morning.
rebrand. We don't know
He
yet.
said, well, yeah, but he's not going to be involved in it if there
No,
is. He
that's
said,
true.
what's gonna happen is Josh Harris is going to come up to him 10 minutes before the meeting and say, "Here's your new hat, buddy," and that's it.
That's a good one.
Uh, and so that's how that's going to go. So I think we let this guy just be the head coach. We've surrounded him with a great culture of good general managers. Bob Myers is still working for the organization, helping pick the right guy. Let's not forget that. Like all these things in place that we loved how they were happening, those all happened and chose Dan Quinn.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a good point. Like, if I can get this goatee going, maybe I could be a stand-in, like a doppelganger.
There it is.
Maybe I
There
could
it
be
is.
the guy that holds the cord for the headset. You know, do they still
There it
do
is.
that, or are they gone cordless? But now I want to build on a point that you made because I think that was a great point. And I thought about it a little bit too. In that, if you think about the job that's got to get done here, it's really starting from the bottom,
The
right?
general manager
You know,
job
it's
is
a
the
it's a
most important.
pretty significant rebuild of this team that has to happen. And it is a young 36, 37-year-old coach really up for that. And maybe, maybe not. I just went on a rant about not setting the bar too low. Maybe Dan doesn't end up being the guy that takes us over the top for a championship. But can he reestablish this team, get us back to competitive, get us back to a playoff team, and then, with the right coaches, with the right mindset, who knows? He's gone to a Super Bowl once. I think that he's in a better situation to go to Super Bowl, you know, this time. I mean, he doesn't have the quarterback yet, but assuming we could figure that spot out, I think the way that this roster is going to get built is going to, if you look at that San Francisco roster, I think there's going to be talent. I believe there's going to be a significant talent upgrade this year. And I don't think this team's going to wait.
Yeah.
You know, need to make the right decisions, but he could be the best man for this situation, given where we are as a franchise and where we are as a team. Because you've also got to build that confidence back in the locker room for the core guys that you have. You got to be able to look John Allen in the eye and tell him you got him. You got to be able to look Terry McLaurin in the eye and
Yep.
tell him what an important piece is and that this thing's going to get turned around. And I think he's, probably more capable of building that confidence pretty quick because he's been there before and he's been a part of, championship organizations in very important roles. Um,
Yep.
so
And there are
again,
growing
like you said, we're
reports.
kind of talking to ourselves into it. I'm definitely not going to sit here and say it's going to be great. But I'm, at this point, like I said, I took the ladder down. I'm riding with them.
Yeah. And there are growing reports that the locker room was splintered and just destroyed by the end of last year and
Of
everything that had
course.
happened. So, I mean, you've got a guy, you know, if that's the case, if the locker room is in shambles and if there are reports that the locker room is splintered, that means the locker room was a disaster, in my opinion. It's always a little bit worse when it's bad stuff
Right.
than the team lets out, right? So if there's reports that the locker room is in shambles, it is a big risk to take the super dweeby X's and O's guy that is not really regarded as much of a leader and is soft spoken and hides behind Dan Campbell when the leadership actually needs to be done. It's a big risk to take that guy and throw him to the Wolves. That is a big risk. And I think he knew that, and I think we knew that too. Um, and like I said, there is a there is a high level of volatility when you talk about bringing in a young head coach into this specific situation. If it's the Chargers, we're talking about a different situation, right? Established veteran quarterback, talented veterans, that locker room knows who they are. That's not here right now. It just isn't.
Right.
So, bringing in an older guy like Dan Quinn, who I think still has a lot of miles left on the tires. Um, Bringing him in, you know,
Hey, 53 is not
Seattle.
old, son.
No, it's
Watch
not. I
yourself.
mean, it's not. I mean, when the good coaches go to, I mean, Harbaugh's in his 60s. The other Harbaugh's
He's
in
a
his
youngster.
60s. Um, yeah, exactly. He's a baby. Uh, I mean, and just like when you look at some of the other options, it's like, look, dude, Belichick's in his 70s. That's not a long term option. Carroll's in his 70s. That's not a long term option. Vrabel had no interest in coming here because of the front office structure. Like, this is a good, given the circumstance, this is a good hire. And I think even without the circumstance, this is a good hire. It's just not the exciting one. And I'll make my last point. We made the flashy, exciting hire for 30 years. 30 years.
True.
Mike Shanahan was as flashy and exciting of a hire as it could have been.
Jim
And
Zorn.
that one was just Jim Zorn. I think Dan Snyder was working on the plot to a movie and he threw Zorn in there so he could say based on a true story. I think we're going to see the box office movie about Jim Zorn. The Swinging
All
Gate
right.
is going to
All right.
debut in theaters near you.
Don't go on a Zordy
Don't get me
rant.
started on Zorn. Anyways, that's all I'm saying is we've done the sexy new hire thing for
More
even
often
Ron
than
Rivera,
not. More
the
often than not.
splashy big name, and it's never worked out because we didn't have the structure around it. So you know what? Maybe the unsexy hire that is the smart hire on paper with the
You
right
trying to say
structure
Dan
around it.
Quinn's not sexy? Come on, man.
Maybe after and nothing about that man screams sexy. No
Thinking
offense,
about
Dan.
shaving my head.
No offense, Danny. Uh, Yeah, I don't think he wants to be second.
That's
I'd
it.
be willing to bet. I don't think he even carries us on the way. But let's do a quick coordinator check-in just for these last couple of minutes here. We might as well make this a
Wild
30-minute
rumors
podcast.
out
Let's
there.
fill this thing out. It has been pretty wild on social media. A lot of Chip Kelly talk. Where are you at on that?
Well, I think the report that came out from Jeremy Fowler says he's a potential candidate. So that's far from certain. I don't know. It doesn't seem to fit the mold. A big personality like Chip Kelly. I don't know. He's the type of offense Dan Quinn would like to run. I don't know. It just seems a little wild, a little flashy. Also, a guy like that doesn't seem like one. Almost similar to what we were saying about EB. Is he going to be willing to take a back seat? I don't know if I buy it.
Yeah, it's a. I don't know what the connection is there with Chip Kelly, or
They
if there
said
is a
he
connection.
interviewed in Oakland or not Oakland, Las Vegas, and he was under consideration there, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's looking like Cliff Kingsbury is the favorite for that job.
He
He's
got
back
it.
from Thailand. He got it? Okay,
Yeah,
that must have happened very recently. Um,
yeah.
so Cliff Kingsbury got that job. He's back from Thailand. That was a wacky little situation there. He just quit the Cardinals, got on a one-way flight, and apparently he's back now. We'll see. Maybe he's got a beard like down to here or something. Um, but
He's on the.
Chip Kelly, I don't know, man. Let's get weird. F it. Let's get wacky. I'm ready to get wild, man. Why not? This whole thing has been a little weird and like fever dreamy. I'm still not convinced that I'm
But
not going to wake
Chip
up.
Kelly is the anti Dan Quinn hire as an OC. Like you go with Dan Quinn and then you come out and go Chip Kelly. It could happen. Anything could happen, and I don't think
But
he was
what is
necessarily
the
very successful other than the one splash year in Philly that everybody thought he was the greatest thing around. But the league figured him out pretty quick. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a connection between him and Dan Quinn. You guys can let me know that in the comments if you know. But it's interesting what's going on with Kelly. It's something to keep an eye on. I mean, I don't know that the offense was ever the problem there. It was that he was given this whole coach centric model and he was a terrible general manager. I think that was more of the problem with him in Philly than it was
I
the offense
mean,
got figured out.
I remember watching it. That offense really came
You think
out
they'll
like
do
a
this?
house of
They're
fire,
gonna
and
do
the
this.
league
Think they're gonna do the
figured it
signs
out.
again?
God help us. I hope
There's gonna
not.
be signs of Rocky Balboa on the sideline and a Philly cheesesteak and stuff like that.
I mean,
F it. Let's get
I
weird.
was against Dan Quinn and I came around, but I kind of don't want any part of Chip Kelly. I hope it's just
You know,
Twitter being Twitter.
I don't want to pull the PR card, and you can't make decisions based off of the fan base, right? But I think you almost have to pass on Chip Kelly because I think Dan Quinn and then Chip Kelly, I think this fan base would go nuts. Would go nuts.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't see
yeah,
it.
well, all logical signs still point to most likely being some kind of like San Francisco assistant, like a
Yeah,
quarterbacks
there's a couple
coach
of good
or
options out there. You know, the who's the QB coach?
Kubiak,
No,
Greece.
Greasy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Greasy's the
Greece,
quarterback coach. No, it's Greasy, not
Greasy,
Grease. Yeah, his
Greasy.
dad was a
Let me look.
legendary
Got it.
quarterback in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, Greasy's a possibility. I would say, what's his name? I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it now. Clay Kubiak, the assistant quarterbacks coach, and Clint Kubiak. I think both of those guys are
Remember
possibilities as
Brian
well.
Greasy on Monday Night Football?
I
That's
do, I
him.
do. Now that you
Yeah,
say it, I just didn't recognize the name when I looked at it. Um, but yeah, I think all three of those guys are options. What about Frank Smith down in Miami? He's not calling plays for Mike McDaniel. He's been studying under Mike McDaniel. Why don't you give him a call?
yeah. I'd much prefer somebody like that, honestly,
Why don't you give him a
than a Chip
call?
Kelly. You know, I mean, Chip
Um,
Kelly at the end of the day, he's going to take a lot of air out of the building, and you
yeah,
just don't want to live through another situation similar to what you had with EB. You know, um, Dan Quinn's got to command that team and command that locker room. I just anyway, we spent too
I don't
much
know.
time on it. I think
You
it's a
put
bad idea.
Yeah, I'd go with you, but I don't know. It could be fun. You put Jaden Daniels in a
We
Chip
don't
Kelly
want
offense, kind of
fun. We
like
don't want give. You just
Mariota
got
back
done
in the.
saying we haven't done the splash higher, and you're contradicting yourself now. But
uh,
anyway, that's a
I'm not. I
wrap
don't
on
want
Chip
it to
Kelly.
happen. I didn't want it. I didn't want any of this to happen. All right.
That's a
I don't
wrap
even
on
know if
Chip Kelly.
I don't even know if we're gonna be here on Saturday. I'm not. I just want to have a good time. All right. Sue me. I got my backwards hat on. I'm dressed up like Dan Quinn. I just want to have a good time.
Yeah,
That's it.
well, we'll see. I guess there's a
Anyways,
press conference coming. We could talk about that on our regular Monday pod.
yeah. OC
Let's
hire to
let's
follow.
wrap
That's
this thing.
probably the next thing. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Anyways, let's wrap this thing up. Without further ado, I've been Dom,
This is Pop.
and thanks for another great week, guys.